Hello, this is the third lesson of the literature course, and it's going to be looking at the plot and structure of Death of a Salesman. It's a play of 2 and a bit acts, and so I'm just going to go through it act by act. The purpose of this video isn't really to tell you much about the meaning of the story, but I want to kind of outline what happens in each act, and then let you kind of decide what significance there is between the contrasting acts. I will give you a bit of an idea to start off with, but again, it's all going to be your ideas. I'll try and run through this quite quickly because this is not meant to be a substitute for reading the book, but just kind of showing the events as happening so you can contrast them. Play starts off in Act 1, and Willie returns home from a business trip. It starts off with this panning of his apartment block, I suppose, and it goes into his bedroom, and he moans at Linda and says, well, I almost drove off the road today and I decided I had to go back. He's very miserable, he's very tired, and he's quite strained by his work. At the same time, in a different part of the house, the 2 sons, Biff and Happy, they're talking about their own hopes and dreams. So Biff is expressing that he actually really likes working outdoors. He couldn't actually find any enjoyment out of an office job. Happy's troubles are quite different. So he's quite successful as a businessman, but he's a womanizer, and he doesn't seem to respect himself for it. He's able to attract all these girls, his boss's wives, but he's not actually feeling fulfilled with them. He's considerably less mature than Biff, but they both have these dreams, and neither one of them seems content in their current life. Then we can hear, from Willie's point of view, a expressionist portion of the play. I'm going to use this word a lot, expressionist. I go through it in the second lesson of the course, but it's basically where Willie is remembering something and we're being shown it as if it were happening at the moment. So he imagines a day when he's just come back from work, and Biff and Happy are scrubbing his car with newspaper and stuff to keep it clean. He's got a present for Biff in the form of a boxing glove, and they play around with the football, and it's quite clear that Biff is a very good football player. At the same time, though, we hear from Willie's point of view that he's got money troubles, so he's unable to make the rent payments, the hire purchase payments for stuff like his washing machine and his fridge, and he's not doing very well at work. At the same time, we also begin to learn that he's having an affair with a woman simply referred to as the woman, and this, at the end of this expressionist portion, just turns into Willie shouting and shouting because he's unable to differentiate his affair with his family life, and he just gets really annoyed. We also interestingly hear that Biff is on track to fail his maths course, and we hear this when Bernard, the son of Charlie, who we'll meet later, comes and tells us. He's met by being called an anemic. Coming back now into reality, he and Charlie play cards. But what's really interesting here is that while they play cards in the present and they talk about stuff like Willie putting a ceiling up in his house, there's also the expressionist portion where Ben comes and he has a fist fight, or at least he trips up Biff. So they both happen at once, and Willie says stuff to Ben when he's actually in real life saying it to Charlie. So it's quite confusing actually what's going on. It ends with Ben going and in the expressionist portion, Biff and Happy are stealing things from a lumberyard. Then Willie and Biff begin to talk about Bill Oliver and a business proposition they have. So Bill Oliver used to employ Biff, but he was sacked for allegedly stealing some basketballs. Biff and Happy decide that they're going to pitch to Bill Oliver an idea where they both go across the country and sell sporting goods. Then when Willie's gone, Linda and Biff talk, and Linda expresses that Willie is mentally ill, and Biff is just really in shock of Linda's grey hair. This is probably one of the realist portions of the play, just because they both confront the fact that Willie needs help. Then finally, whilst Willie and Linda talk in their bed upstairs, we can see as the audience Biff going down into the basement and finding a tube which Willie had previously used to try and kill himself. So after such an uplifting Act 1, we go into Act 2, which is even more uplifting. And this is where Willie and Linda have breakfast at the start. It's really quite optimistic. He's really looking forward to having dinner with his two sons later on in the evening. Willie then departs and goes to meet with his boss, Harold Wagner. This is because he wants to discuss possibly moving into an office rather than being a travelling salesman, just because he's having trouble driving and he's not making much money. Interestingly, he's only working on commission, so after working for this company for ages, they still haven't given him a salary. He goes to meet with Harold Wagner, and Wagner has no interest whatsoever in speaking to Willie. In fact, he constantly interrupts him so they can both listen to his son reciting state capitals on a tape recorder. We're told that Harold Wagner sacks Willie. He says that there's no place for him anymore, and Willie goes up into one of the most passionate speeches he has of the play. He says, "A man is not a piece of fruit. You can't just throw the peel away." But he's sacked nonetheless. Then we go into an expressionist portion of the play. If you ever watch a film version of this, it's usually depicted by Willie walking down the street and just looking really confused. But in the play, Willie goes back to a time where Ben offers him to go and work in Alaska with him to manage some timber fields or something. He declines and says that we've got such a great deal going on here, why would I ever want to move to Alaska? And Ben says, well, okay, and they never see each other again. We also transition into another expressionist portion, and that is the game day. As I said before, Biff is an excellent football player, and I mean American football, by the way. And this is a final where they're preparing to go and watch Biff play. Biff has scholarships to 3 different universities, and it's said actually in Act 1 that he intends to go to the University of Virginia. So we're preparing for game day. Charlie takes the mick out of Willie for caring so much about the football game, and we never get to see the football game. We just are left with them leaving off. The next part of the play is when Willie returns to reality and visits Charlie's office. He goes and finds a grown-up Bernard sitting there, and he's surprised to learn that Bernard is actually a lawyer, and later on that day he's going to be working in the Supreme Court. But Bernard doesn't tell him this, he only learns this later. But what they do talk about is what happened to Biff. Why was he such a great football player before? And then suddenly he's struggling to find work and ends up working on farms and stuff. And Bernard says, well, on one day, he went to go and see you in Boston, and he came back and he was crying and he's trying to burn his shoes with the University of Virginia printed on them, and they had a fist fight. So Willie's taken aback by it. Charlie comes in, offers Willie a job. Willie says, no, I'll just take money from you to pay for my rent. Now we're met at Frank's Chop House. We don't see Willie first, we see Biff and Happy, and they lie to get a girl to come and sit with them. They also tell her to call one of her friends. I believe her name is Miss Forsyth. So then Willie arrives, and he goes off into one of his kind of mental states when he finds out that Biff didn't go through and speak to Bill Oliver. In fact, he actually ended up getting scared and running out of a fire escape with his pen. But this is the climax of the play, in my opinion. It's the expressionist portion where Willie has just heard that Biff is a failure yet again, and he goes back to another meeting with the woman. He hears a knock on the door. He tells the woman to go and get in the bathroom, which is really quite romantic. But so he goes to open the door, and Biff is like, "Dad, I failed my maths exam. I need you to come and go and speak to the maths teacher so I can go to the University of Virginia." Willie's like, okay. But in between, Biff makes an impression of his teacher. The woman is obviously too, I guess, immature to understand how serious the situation is, and begins to laugh. And so she comes out, and Biff sees that he is having an affair. Biff sees that Willie's having an affair and cheating on his mother. Biff obviously begins to cry. He calls his dad a phony and a fake. And then we return to reality. The last part I've just labelled confrontation and catastrophe. Biff and Willie have an argument at their house. They argue that no one ever told the truth in that house, and that Biff needs Willie to just accept his reality. It ends with Linda telling Biff to get out of the house and that he's not a good influence on his father. And the catastrophe largely stems from Willie thinking that he needs to provide for his family, and he thinks that the only way he can do that is kill himself and then claim the life insurance. The last thing we see in Act 2 is, indeed here, is the screeching of like a car revving up, and then we got introduced to the Requiem. And we introduced to the Requiem, like the set would obviously spring up, and they would be looking over Willie's gravestone. Just to give, it's a very small portion of the play, so I think I don't need to go into that much detail. Willie's very determined. He sees that his dad's dead, but his dad would have wanted him to keep on going and beat this racket. Biff just knows that his father has wasted his life and feels very depressed about it. Charlie becomes very philosophical, almost elevated. I mean, it's preached like using very, I would say, religious language. Nobody does blame this man. He was just a simple salesman, but yet when people stopped liking him, it came as such a shock to him. And finally, we are left with Linda saying that she just doesn't know what to do. It's probably the saddest part of the play, because we finally realise that although Linda and Willie were married, they didn't actually know each other, and Linda was absolutely powerless to help Willie. Then the curtains close and we feel horrible about our lives. So this is the very little kind of interpretation I'll give you. Act 1, all about hopes and dreams and perhaps making a better life for themselves. Act 2 is all about downfalls and the crushing of the dreams which were established in Act 1. And the Requiem is all about not giving us any catharsis. Just by using a weird kind of structure, Arthur Miller goes directly against tragic norms and does so to kind of just show how there never was a rising up in Willie's life. Even in the part which suggests hopes, there's still a very depressing tone. And so, you know, it's just a play about a not so great man living a not so great life and having a tragic death. I hope that this video has been useful. Please do read the play if you're studying it. Don't use this because I've not gone in that much depth, but I think I've done an alright job of just showing how the story flows. I hope this has been useful, and I hope to see you again next time.